What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you for tuning in. I have the Boldts with us, Brandon and Lisa from Primitive Beer in Longmont, Colorado. Thanks to the two of you for being on.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
I am excited to talk with you. I'm excited. I'm just going to go right into telling people that I will be drinking this. I know you're super jealous right now. Real quick, give us the snapshot. Give us an idea of what is Primitive Beer.
We are a brewery that produces only spontaneous beer. We follow a really strict set of rules called Méthode Traditionnelle. So we're emulating Belgian Lambic. We're really, really niche, and we're really focused on making the best beer we can in this really specific style. And I think we're really happy with the results so far. We're a pretty young brewery.
A lot of people are really happy with the results, for sure. So
yeah, we're stoked that we've found groups of people who are into the weird stuff that we're making. It's definitely not a standard kind of brewery setup. We're not producing a beer that everyone is naturally going to say, "Oh yeah, this makes sense to me. I love this flavor profile." It can certainly be polarizing.
Yes.
It's exciting when we do find those communities.
I like it. Sometimes you have to preface people. It's more like you're drinking a really esoteric wine than sometimes a beer that people might be used to. So that's what we're going to get into, people. But I want to take you back, as we always do, kind of some origins of this journey. Where did beer start? Brandon, let's start with you. Where did beer start for you? And then we'll touch with Lisa on kind of where you guys kind of got into this crazy lifestyle of craft beer.
Yeah, beer started for me actually at about the age of 17. Towards the end of high school. Despite these, rugged adult features that you see before you right now, and this semblance of a beard that I'm kind of growing, I had a pretty good baby face in high school and could not pass off as 21 even if I wanted to. I was interested in beer and drinking it specifically, but also kind of what separated one style from another. As a science geek or a nerd, there was a lot of just the mysticism of alcoholic fermentation to begin with. So I started with a really basic homebrew kit. And if I had to guess, it was probably like a pumpkin beer was the first ever fermented, and it was god awful. And there were many, many god awful homebrews after that. But part of that process was learning, why doesn't this taste like what I think beer should taste like? Or, maybe the adjunct lagers that I was used to at the time. What am I doing wrong? What are the parts of the process? And that kind of became a bit of a fixation or a healthy obsession, trying to do the same thing, but correcting it, figuring out whatever resources there were and going from there. So I had a kind of a homebrew background at that point and an appreciation for craft beer. And that got kind of ramped up over time when I met Lisa in graduate school for geology.
I got into craft beer late in college. So probably like 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
No. That was high school, 2009, 2010. And it was, I went to Ohio State. So it was just sort of becoming a big deal. There was lots of new things to try. And I would do, a make your own 6-pack and just see what all the different things were. And then I met Brandon in grad school and we just dove in the deep end. And we took a lot of road trips where we'd kind of specifically orient for which breweries we wanted to visit. We did a northern route. We did a, deep south route. So it was pretty cool to just get the kind of regional differences between all the breweries as well.
Any beers or breweries stand out where you're like, that is where I want to be, what really piques my interest? Do you remember any specific beers or breweries?
The first beer that I ever had that really blew my mind was Allagash White. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. And we finally got to go there last fall, and it's even cooler than you ever think it would be. So
yes.
that was pretty great.
Yeah.
And especially I like that with what you're doing now with the cool ship, spontaneous fermentation. I mean, they set the tone way back for that to even have an opportunity to kind of be where you are now. So I love that connectivity between those. That makes a lot of sense to me. When did it become a profession? Take us forward to that time.
Yeah, so we met in grad school, and then we both got master's degrees in various fields of geology and climate science, and kind of
craft brewers. Makes sense.
Naturally, we're from all walks of
all walks of geology.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we were planning to get jobs in that field But we sort of took 6 to 9 months off just to plan our wedding and to kind of get situated. And in the meantime, we got jobs in coffee and beer, and then just steered into beer and never left.
Yeah, it was certainly an accidental right place, right time type of transition. So we went to graduate school at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, which, if you haven't been to Flagstaff, still kind of the best place.
Beautiful.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And it definitely challenges your definition of what you expect for Arizona in terms of political and kind of topographic geologic settings. But after we decided to take 9 months off just to pursue hobbies and to chill, our hobbies at the time were coffee and beer, which are pretty similar to our hobbies now on some level. And figured, if we want to pursue these hobbies, let's go to an epicenter or, an area where this is really going off. So for us, it was, all right, maybe we move to Colorado, maybe the Pacific Northwest, maybe California. And we just happened to have some friends with couches to surf out in Denver.
Perfect.
Worked out.
She got the job first, which makes sense because she's got really all the talent in this couple anyway. As a barista at Downpours Coffee in Denver, which very solid spot. And meanwhile, I stayed home and just continued to homebrew and applied for different jobs. Mostly, actually, a lot of
beer tender.
A lot of beer tender jobs. A lot of
get your foot in the door.
I just wanted to see what it was like to be around the industry professionally
and not be in grad school.
Just
like, what's that like?
But certainly at that point, we'd even talked like, oh, could you imagine opening a brewery? We have zero professional skills.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't really seem realistic. We shouldn't even go down that pipeline. It's let's set our kind of targets in a way that we can achieve some goals. Yeah, that makes sense. And one afternoon we were taking one of our standard beer tours. It happened to be towards the Louisville Lafayette area, so we went to Gravity, 12 Degree, and then the last stop on that evening was Odd 13, which had only opened about 2 or 3 months previously.
Really recently.
So they opened up in August of 2013. We were there at this point.
November.
October 2013. And kind of hit it off. That was one of those breweries where also what I was producing at the time at home very much felt in rhythm with what Odd 13 was producing on site. They were playing around with some Brettanomyces fermentations, the inklings of use of lactic acid bacteria.
Some Berliner Weisses, red IPAs, 2013 beers.
Red IPAs, 2013. Oh, those were
so hot. So hot in 2013.
Mosaic was just coming onto the scene.
Hot.
Big things.
It was great.
So I applied for...
It really lined up with what we were interested in.
Totally. So I applied for a part-time beer tending job there. I was doing other things on the side like BJCP and eventually Cicerone and, kind of educating in addition to practicing with our small setup. And that led to a part-time cellarman position, which just... again, coincidence and timing. By April of 2014, I was offered a head brewer position there.
It was quick,
right? And it was at that point also. Odd 13 was much smaller. It was only the taproom facility, pretty much a Frankenbrew setup with a bunch of dairy equipment and a direct fire kettle.
Hadn't even canned until then. Like it was really
small.
We
were hand bottling 22-ounce bombers.
I remember those.
2013 was quite a different landscape from the beer scene than 2020. Especially 2020, even 2019. So that's how kind of the professional footing got in there.
Yeah.
And then so that's where we met. Give some people some context. So we met when both of you were at Odd 13 and interacted a few times, and then we did a collaboration beer under Good Bugs and our friends at Inland Island, John Girantano and their team.
With strawberry inspired
Frigid Frigaria.
Yes. That was a super crazy fun beer because it was very early on as we were exploring the different expression potential of different yeast and bacteria strains and co-fermentation, a lot of that. And so it was fun because you were just like, fuck yeah, let's go for it. Let's do some crazy weird stuff. I was like, awesome. Yeah. Because at that time, Odd 13 definitely was establishing itself as very much on the forefront of the big IPAs, and as that movement really exploded, you mentioned Mosaic, but it was very much like these Superfan, codename Superfan, and these iterations with different hop profiles. And we said, let's back that off and focus on different yeast profiles. And in your garage brewery, like the amount of quality and the amount of beer that you guys were producing out of the garage in the back of that patio was amazing to me. So the collaboration was important, and it meant a lot. And the way that we navigated that, and it was super early on, and then we got to present that beer was a ton of fun. So for you guys, I'm interested now. You guys went from this geeky small garage, like literally people. It's a garage and dairy equipment and all, and it still is.
Yeah, it's being. I think at this point it's being retrofitted into an event space over at Out 13. But you can still, the garage still exists. Now they're really focused on a production facility, which is down the street. But I'd say that was I think we both felt if we could produce beer in that setting and kind of make that work. And Lisa was taproom manager, and she was able to really understand that front of house, understand the marketing, all of that. That gave us a lot of confidence to take it a step larger in terms of the equipment that we were using, as well as the step larger in terms of maybe the ambition or the specificity.
We also saw what all went into it, how much work went into it. I think if you're a home brewer and you think, I like making beer, so I want to start a brewery, it's pretty important to work in the industry in various roles, because you see how much more it is than just making beer. Making beer is just one part,
and a very small part.
And there's so much more, and it's so stressful.
Let's go down that path a little bit, because I'm interested in that. So what you're doing with primitive beer, even the name of it, it's very much, we're going to talk about spontaneous fermentation in a second. I want people to understand, but you guys are artists. You're like one step away from the farm, in the mentality that you have, in the scale that you have. Yet you guys have been very smart from a brand and storytelling and experiential side. And I think a lot of that came, obviously, we know it's not you, Brandon. Don't worry. Everyone knows that's Lisa all the way. Yeah. And I think it's a hard balance, because sometimes you're so off the beaten path that you don't land with people that are more mainstream. Yet you guys have found a very creative way to kind of balance those out. So Lisa, let's go into that, and then we'll talk about spontaneous, because from a brand perspective, primitive beer is really smart. Talk about why it was important and how you kind of navigated that when you were developing the brand side of primitive.
So for the art and the labels, we worked with a couple really talented artists. We worked with Kai Bose, we worked with Stacey McMahon, and Nat Peck for a lot of our photos, Kelly Johnson. We just had really awesome people helping us out that, knew what we liked, and then sort of showed us examples. And then we took that and we went with it. And they were really awesome to work with as far as the visual elements. Our space came together really nice. We wanted a place that sort of, when you walked in addition to the wave of smell that kind of wafts over you, that's like fresh baked bread and just oak in your face. It's really wonderful. To the max. Yeah. It's a beautiful space with a lot of bright light, and it's a place where you want to spend time, and kind of sets you up for this expectation of, okay, this is beer, but it's not just beer. So there's more to it. And then I'd say for social media, I post what I would be interested in. If I were to just be following primitive, what would I want to learn about? Because there's so much you can say about the ingredients and about the process and about the space and about the people. And it's just, talk about what you think is interesting, and other people will think it's interesting, I think.
I could not agree more. Here's one of the things that I thought was fascinating about it, because knowing the space of Méthode Traditionnelle, or even before that, Méthode Goose, and then people were saying lambic style, all that story. And it's the geekiest you can possibly be in beer. And sometimes it gets separated from I just want a beer that makes me feel good and tastes good, and I can hang with my friends. And sometimes it's so thoughtful. So what I liked about it was when you guys were showing your backstory, it was the two of you just being goofy, laying on barrels. And I just liked it. It was highbrow, lowbrow in a very clever way.
Well, that's where Slap the Bag and Spon Bing Bong has come from.
Let's get into that. Slap the Bag.
So we have these, bag-in-box young beers, and you can take the bag out and you can drink it like boxed wine, which we think is it's fun. If you don't want to go down into the weeds with us about the specific details and your enzymatic rests and all your, turbid mashing.
She loves specific brewing.
I love it.
Yeah.
So then if you just like how it tastes and you think it's good and you want to drink it with your friends, it's fun, bing bong. Like, don't even worry about it. So we've just been having a little fun with it, and it doesn't need to be crazy serious all the time, but it can be, but it doesn't have to.
Well, let's get into serious. Let's nerd alert out with Brandon. Here we go, Brandon. We're going to talk about spontaneous fermentation.
Yeah.
What the hell does that mean?
So spontaneous fermentation is really a broader class of starting a fermentation without the purposeful introduction of different microbes. We all know that in order to, and there's, outside of even alcoholic fermentation, there are many other even, I think sourdough, the first time that you're actually setting out, an equal part mixture of flour and water, that first start to fermentation, that was spontaneous.
Yes.
That will differ from, I think, wild fermentation, where in the case of sourdough, if you start growing that culture up, it is no longer spontaneous, even if it originated from kind of airborne microbes. Other forms of spontaneous fermentation or inoculation include using fruit skins, some types of winemaking, I think carbonic maceration with that. There's some certain styles of cider. So, spontaneity and use of the microbes that are all around us, that was how fermentation for everything originally started, until people realized, I can kind of scoop a little of this slurry, put it on this other thing. Oh, that seems consistent. I like the way this tastes. Let's keep that going. For our specific type of spontaneous fermentation, we're going through a set of, we'll call it method traditional, a set of 28-ish rules that are inspired by traditional Belgian lambic. Belgian lambic is, much like champagne, has a geographic appellation. The idea is that if you produce this beverage outside of this region to the southwest of Brussels, you should not be calling it lambic. And we, out of respect for the history of that style, out of the modern brewers who still make these beers, out of the hardships that they've had to endure as a brewing industry during different twists and turns of acquisitions, et cetera, we want to make sure that we're not trying to profit off of someone else's kind of work for centuries at this point.
And give people very specific, like when people think of brewing, they're seeing a kettle, right? They're seeing conical fermenters. That's the visual that they have. So talk about how that's different. Cool ship. Talk about what a cool ship is, how those microbes are actually finding their way into the wort.
Totally. And I will give a very brief, we have the hot side still. We still have a mash tun and a kettle as the two major instruments to derive the sugars from the malted barley and the raw wheat in our case. The kettle to sterilize, concentrate, and add hops to that wort. We do a very different mash profile, as well as use really aged hops. If you want to get into the weeds in that, we can. But the whole idea behind our hot side is basically to produce a wort that has a whole bunch of inaccessible sugars, starches, and proteins. We want to make sure that the first microbes that come out of the air, because we're not controlling this, are not able to basically decimate this, the entirety of the sugars. Otherwise, you don't have a beverage that has the potential to evolve, change, and feed the more fastidious, slow-growing microbes that take 8 or more months to even be introduced into the style of beer. We're using
9 months. I want to hover on that for a minute, because a lot of people are thinking 3 weeks for a beer, 4 weeks for a beer, 8, 9 months
before I would say it's even ready to be
drinkable.
Even drinkable, and
like palatable. Even that you not like quaffable, palatable, where you don't have to spit it out the second.
Weirdo. I can drink. It's palatable to me at
a little too early.
Sure. I hear you.
At the potentially like botulism side of the spectrum. But for me, that's an important part of the journey, is understanding where it comes from and what attributes I can expect to evolve out, to amplify, to change over time.
Well, so the bottle you have, when we bottled it, it was 2 years old, and we bottled it 2 years old.
Bottled it,
and we bottled it in May last year. So now it's
been in the bottle over a year. So the day that we brewed that was over 3 years ago at this point. So
it takes a while.
2007.
It's very much thinking about in the way of wines, of vintages, of laying things down. This is Shibble Shabble, a 2-year blend. So, and it's nuanced for sure, but just to give people a little bit of context, high level, when you said attributes, give us an idea of somebody says spontaneous beer, sour beer. Give us an idea of what that means contextualizing against what they might expect from a normal beer, just at a high level. And then we'll get into the nuance when we actually taste these, but high level.
Yeah, and we'll revisit the coolship because that's definitely for us the most important of that spontaneous fermentation. But what we'd expect from a flavor profile, a lot of that has to do with blending, and that is at the tail end of the process, and that is something that we take equal parts in, even though she doesn't really care so much about the nitty gritty of the mash.
But I have a good palate, and I can decide on blends and taste things.
So I think for both of us, though, one of the reasons we fell in love with this style of mixed microbial fermentation or sour beer or whatever, larger umbrella you want to put it under, it should show restraint. Our favorite versions of traditional lambic are not overtly sour. They shouldn't be acidic or vinegary to the max. It's really a balance between some of the bitterness and the structure provided the hops, the tannins of the grains, a little bit of the mouthfeel that's provided by a complex mash procedure, and then some acidity, enough that really it cleanses the palate. We think about it more like the levels of acidity in white wine, or especially natural process wines and some ciders in that way. It shouldn't be something that, how sour can we get it? It's really about what can be refreshing and what do you want to take another sip.
We like the less sour, the better. I think it's just more refreshing. It's more drinkable. It appeals to a wider group of people.
Yeah,
understood. You guys, I'm totally embarrassed. I forgot my corkscrew. So here's what we're going to do. I'm literally going to run downstairs and you guys are going to talk to the audience. This is your show now for the next 78 seconds. So you started pouring out of the bag. Talk about the bag a little bit more as a medium for what you're doing. And then, I don't know, let's give people some tasting notes. But you guys go. I'm going to be right back. This is the first time we've done this on the show. I love it.
All right. Well, one of the ways we package our beer, in addition to bottles, is bag and box. So this is actually a 1.5 liter, double-walled plastic bag with a spout that we put into a cardboard box, and this is how we sell it and serve it. It's completely uncarbonated. It's young beer. It is it's 9 months to a year to 2 years old, which for us is young.
Yeah, it's been in that bag though
this
for
particular one
at least a year.
Yeah, I think this was
fall. So we're testing the longevity of this packaging type.
It's something that we love in Belgium. There's a couple breweries that sell. Well, so you can get young spontaneous beer at almost any beer bar that has lambic, but to actually get to go young lambic in a bag and box, there's maybe 4 producers at this point that do it, and so we were really excited to bring that tradition here.
Yeah,
you guys did really great. That was amazing. You need your own show. It was perfect.
I'd say it also challenges people's expectations, because a big part of the beer in the bag, the beer in the box, besides being young spontaneous beer, which has a flavor profile that is unique to itself and unique to every batch and brewery that produces it, we serve it still. So traditionally, in that way, it also, without carbonation and served at cellar temperature, it does have more attributes that are similar to white wine or those ciders. When we eventually blend and bottle them, the re-fermentation that occurs with the either addition of young spontaneous beer or a sugar source like local honey, that refuels those microbes to process that sugar, and in a closed environment, it just gets absorbed back into it. So our older, more mature beer, those blends that are in the bottles, they make the transition that we say are similar to white wine into champagne.
Tell people about Shibble Shabble, 2-year blend. You mentioned 3 years in the making, bottled months and months and months ago already. Like, talk about this beer, the expectation you'd have, blending a little bit. What are the things that you're kind of trying to find in a beer like this?
The last May, when we bottled that, it was the first time we'd ever packaged 4 Primitive in bottles. And, you're blending. In the future, we can blend toward flavors we've made before. Like it?
Good. That's what we're going for.
This. Hey.
Yeah.
But when you blend for the first time to do this unknown process in a bottle, you don't know what to blend toward. So we basically made Shibble Shabble and then this other beer, Jazz Pilot, and they were both our unfruited bottled offerings. And so Shibble Shabble was a blend of two barrels that were like. So they were sort of the ones that had the most similar qualities. We liked how they already tasted kind of on their own, but together they were nice. And then Jazz Pilot was a blend of multiple barrels that were all really different. And they all kind of had the different components that we'd want in the final blend, but seeing how they all played together. And honestly, they're very similar. They were very similar.
Yeah, it's crazy how. So yeah, like Lisa was saying, we spent a lot of time and we had lots of options, before us. Of all right, we're going to open with year-old beer, but it's going to still take us a while before we have anything with carbonation. Do we brew other styles beforehand? Do we even wait a year before we brew this? We knew that we wanted to open this project with clear intentions, with a product that already resembled and was part of the evolution of exactly what we were going for. Instead of maybe brewing some pitch culture sours.
We can make IPAs.
Yeah, we can make lots of other styles of beer.
You guys make really good IPAs, by the way.
That's appreciated.
Not primitive.
This is what actually gets us excited to make beer.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of kind of waiting to get there and figuring out what that would taste like. Part of the fortunate process is understanding how our beers evolve even before blending, even before re-fermentation. Understanding, all right, this is what a beer tastes like now. What is it going to taste like at 18 months? And let's taste through multiple barrels and make sure this is a relatively kind of consistent evolution. So then when we started blending, it was let's take some like barrels and see what direction those evolve. Let's take some very disparate barrels. Let's see what direction those evolve. And we also
we had fruit beers.
And we also, fruit re-fermentations, but even more similar to those other two examples, a single barrel, which we added honey to in a bottle.
That was really nice.
And now we sparkle, something that already, it's rare that you find a barrel that you say, ooh, this doesn't need any rounding of the edges. This doesn't need something else to blend in to get it where you want it. I was like, oh, this barrel just tastes good on its own. So being able to understand now, coming from 3 different mentalities and also then going through the exact same re-fermentation process, what does this auxiliary re-fermentation in a high-pressure glass environment do to change those beers? We were talking about,
and how does the honey play into it?
And how does the honey play into it? And kind of surprisingly, at this point, Jazz Pilot and Shibble Shabble, the two, the similar blend and the very disparate blend, they, I think, early on had differences in flavor, even if they were approximating the levels of acidity and bitterness and balance that we were looking for. But interestingly, and we have to do a lot more studying of it by blending and tasting, they've kind of evolved to a very similar direction.
I'm doing a lot more studying right now. When I was like, oh, I got to find people to drink this with. Now I'm just going to drink this myself. So I want to touch on this specific liquid in the glass, and then I want to talk about the journey that your community has to take with you. So this, right off the bat, like to your point, like it's very vinous in the way that it very much has a lot of wine characteristics to it, even super tight bubbles. Which, right? It doesn't feel overcarbonated because a lot of times these can get a little fuzzy on the palate, right? Where you get a little bit like over carbonation. There is assertive acidity, but it's not lingering, right? It doesn't like jam up the back of your jowls, which some do, which I like. And there's a ton of fruit character in an unfruited beer, which is super fascinating, right? Just those ester profiles, like tons of underripe stone fruit, which is super cool. People like, you need this in your life. I'm telling you.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate that. Fruit forward. And that's we're lucky to have a group of microbes in our space that, produce flavors that we get excited for, and definitely fruit forward. I mean, we in our own culture we get a lot of peach, honey, some pineapple.
I would say lemon and black tea.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a little tannic. I definitely pick up that for sure as well. So you have this community of microbes. I think is very fitting in just the way that you have defined yourselves as a team, as a brand, as brewers. I'm interested in, you said the journey that a beer has to take and your understanding of how to kind of own that space and be able to manage it and not manipulate it. It's got to do what it's got to do, but you're just trying to be a good steward for it. I think about your community. Yes, you guys have built a great community where you have very avid fans and people that very much feel like they're in this journey for 3 years with you. Yeah. Talk about the importance of that. I want to end with this. How important it is that, you've had beers that come out amazing, and I'm sure you've had to dump beers where it goes, that did not work at all. Yeah. And people's understanding or lack of understanding, their buy-in, they're like, I'm bringing a friend, but they only drink Coors Original. All of these dynamics are at play. For you, cultivating community has been important. Talk about who these people are, what they mean to you, and the importance of them buying into your journey as much as you have.
I think it's all about communication, because if you want someone to drink a beer that took 3 years to make and to be excited about it, they have to know kind of like every step of the way what went into it, because otherwise it's just something that you made and you found in a dusty corner and it doesn't mean anything. And then I think when people come in, like, they're just so excited, and we're so excited to have them. It's a space that invites you in, and it smells incredible, but it's like really overwhelming. And our fans they're the best. They're really cool.
Absolutely. I could not be more thankful for the people who have supported us and allowed us to continue making these crazy beers. Because if no one, despite our excitement, right, if no one else, took part in this or supported us or, allowed this experiment to continue, it couldn't exist. That's a simple fact on that side. For us, a huge component of the tasting room and the attitude that we want to portray is we understand how esoteric this is and how much of a kind of geeky fun experiment this is for us. Beer should be accessible for everyone, period. Beer has always been a beverage that doesn't need any prerequisites to be able to come to the counter and enjoy, because really the whole idea of beer is bringing people together. That could be what instigates conversation. That could be what instigates community. It really doesn't have to be about the beer whatsoever. That just is, maybe that excuse to be in the same place at the same time. We're glad that our beer, attracts both people who are walking by and are just curious, as well as people who are specifically seeking out this style. And in that way, I think the community gets a little more interesting, just because, at least from a fermentation education standpoint, you get people from a lot of the people who are ready to get into the weeds, and the people who are like, no, I don't. That's all good. It's fun to look at your cool ship. It's fun to look at the oak. I think this beer is fine. This is great. I'll keep drinking it. I'm excited to talk to these other people. And we've had
birthday parties.
Yeah, we've had a
wedding at Primitive. So it's pretty cool.
So, and it's even going back to what the first question, or what we started talking about. A lot of our mentality towards branding and all that is to trust the people around us that we know are talented, to not micromanage that process. We know when we see something or taste something and we like it.
We know what we're good at, and we know what we're not good at.
We have fewer skills than many other people, maybe more directed in certain areas, but you're trusting and allowing our friends to do what they are great at.
And you were talking about very much the people that are on the end kind of consuming the beers and interacting with you. And it's funny, I was just going to touch on the collaborative spirit that we met and have interacted multiple times from Odd 13, Four Noses. I'm sure we're going to do a Primitive blend at some point and stick my schnoz in a bunch of barrels. That's what I love to do. It's brewers also. Brewers very much have bought into this. And literally, as I'm thinking that, our friend Jeffrey Ehrman from Paradox writes this, and I want to just read this. Spontaneous fermentation is the dark matter of brewing. Much of its magic has yet to be mystified or lab duplicated. This makes it extremely intriguing for those who love discovery and experimentation. How many times did you write that down before you got it perfect, Jeffrey?
Cheers. Sentiment, and I'm completely in agreement, Jeff. Thank you so much for writing in.
Yes, exactly. I just love this. The fact that other brewers are inspired, that you're inspired by them, all the way back to Lambic and everything that's come after that, and the respect that there is across Paradox to you guys, to so many other breweries in that space, I think is a really important part of what craft beer has done maybe better than any industry, is the collaborative spirit within and with the general public and consumers and guests that you have in your tap room. It really matters. It really does.
Yeah. It's fun that we all get excited about something that can also just be a commodity in that way. It's fun that we get there. Yeah. And to that point, there are a lot, as brewers, spontaneous fermentation for a lot of us is that end all be all. Is, we understand
it's basically magic,
right?
It's like you're not.
It really is.
Yeah,
crazy.
There is a magical component.
Even
when you start to understand some of the dials, it's even when you learn the science, you can still allow it to be mystical, and you can still allow it to be passion and art in that way. It's also the fact that it's an enduring style, even before there was a name for it, even before it was lambic. Yeah. Pool ships, those vessels for cooling, were used everywhere. Some degrees of the process, back to what the earliest forms of fermentation that we knew of, 15,000 years ago. So there's a long history of just using what's around you. I think spontaneous fermentation also harkens to, we only use Colorado ingredients for every step of the process. That makes sense for us because, unlike a lot of styles of beer where it's hard to define what terroir is, how do you define a sense of time and place? If the ingredients are coming from a lot of different places, it's not impossible, certainly. This is a style of beer that really lends itself to allowing that space, those local ingredients, the specific process to really form an identity and really form a house character or culture in that way that can be more difficult to form in other ways. We also know going into it, we'll never perfect it. We'll never fully understand it. And it's, I think having a lifelong pursuit, there's something rewarding to that, knowing that you'll never reach the finish line.
We're setting bottles aside from our first few things just to taste them in 10 years, and see what happens. So
yeah, they're going to be artifacts at some point.
They'll be
you're talking about terroir. It's the very flavor and aroma of the air in which you breathe as a human being in a given place. Like that's pretty much the full stop, the end. That is the flavor of Longmont, Colorado. Like exactly to that. You have a little opportunity to manipulate and blend, but that is what your terroir truly tastes like. I love it. I'm inspired. I'm like salivating right now. I really need food with this. I'm gonna go make some food to pair with this. I think it's super interesting. I think I have some seafood downstairs. I'm thinking mussels. I'm thinking shrimp. Like this very much.
Your fridge is way better stocked than ours.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we were crushing raw oysters. My 6-year-old and 3-year-old slurped down half a dozen oysters each. Very proud chef dad over here. I'll also do some beer pairing. I really appreciate you both being on. I'm so glad that I got to taste this beer with you guys. It really means a lot. And I know, especially in these times, like just a moment of levity to geek out a little bit with some delicious Longmont aroma of spontaneous beer. It's I'm grateful.
No,
thanks for having us.
Yeah, we had a great time.
All right, I appreciate you guys.
Later.
And, we'll talk again soon. We'll drink a beer together sometime soon. Cheers.
Bye.
No joke. I can't help but always be real with my tasting. It's like the schnoz. This is what I do. This is absolutely a beer, if you're into beer, that you need to try. It's just so nuanced, so complex. It drinks a lot more like wine in some characteristics, tons of fruit notes. So I'm a big fan. I'm a bigger fan of Lisa and Brandon and the way that they've cultivated such a clever brand, such a thoughtful brand, such good storytellers, really creating community. Just the fact that somebody as talented as Jeffrey Ehrman, who only wrote that quote once, I love it, are just inspired by them is important. It really, really matters to me because community and building that culture through cultured beverage, I think is great. It's perfect. I am all about it. All right, everybody. That's it for today. Tomorrow we go from live to Best Served High, Hospitality Industry, Good Health. We have on Angela Dugan from Dugan and Dame, a prolific bartender down in Boca Raton, Florida, who also is doing some herbalist, nutritionalist stuff. So they're kind of bridging the gap between what they're doing on the beverage side to kind of some health and wellness, which I am a big fan of. We'll talk to them. So everybody have a great Saturday. I appreciate you all. Cheers.